Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're looking at something really fascinating, one of the most, unexpected twists in American political history.
Yeah, it's a great story.
We're unpacking the Anti-Masonic Party. Now, this was a political party built pretty much entirely on a conspiracy theory, this idea that, a secret group of Freemasons was pulling all the strings in the U.S. government.
Right, this kind of shadowy cabal idea.
Exactly. But here's the kicker. This party, founded on paranoia, actually ended up inventing some of the most basic, democratic, and transparent tools we still use in politics today.
It's this amazing paradox, isn't it? I mean, they failed completely, utterly failed at their big goal, winning the presidency, getting rid of Masons in office. Total flop on that front. But they ended up engineering this massive overhaul of the political system. It's what you might call a successful failure. They came up with a national nominating convention, the idea of a written party platform.
Things we just take for granted now.
Absolutely. And their rivals immediately saw how useful these were and copied them. So their innovations became the standard.
So our mission in this deep dive is to really get into the weeds on this. Where did this moral panic come from? How did it get turned into a political movement so fast?
And why this, short, really intense period was so critical for what came next, the whole second party system.
Yeah, we're basically looking at how this powerful mix of anti-elitism and moral fear was grabbed by some, pretty sharp political operators.
Pragmatic leaders, definitely.
And channeled into building these permanent, very public political structures.
Which is ironic, right? Because these structures were kind of the opposite of the secrecy they were fighting against.
That's the core irony. The Anti-Masonic Party didn't just create a political option, it built the machinery for a new kind of politics. It basically dragged American politics out of those smoky back rooms, the era of good feelings.
Where gentlemen made deals. Exactly. And pushed it into this new era of mass democracy, public arguments, organized parties. And they did it all while battling this enemy they saw as the ultimate hidden hand.
Okay, so let's start where it all kicked off. Every big movement seems to need a spark, maybe even a martyr figure. And in 1826, this whole thing found its very unlikely hero in William Morgan.
Yeah, William Morgan. Definitely not who you'd pick to start a national movement.
Tell us about him. He's from Batavia, New York, right? How does this guy light such a huge fire?
Well, the sources paint him as not exactly a leading citizen. He was a stonecutter, a bricklayer.
Okay, working class.
Right, and described as having questionable repute, apparently a heavy drinker and a gambler. So definitely not part of the local elite.
Which probably made his message more powerful later on, contrasting with the Masons.
Could be. It definitely played into the anti-elite narrative. But his initial motivation seems really personal. It wasn't some grand political idea at first.
Yeah, what was his beef with the Masons? It wasn't ideology, right?
Yeah. No, not initially. He just felt personally snubbed by the local Masonic lodge. The details are a bit fuzzy. Some accounts say they wouldn't let him join.
Okay.
Others say he was already a Mason, even a Royal Archmason, but they wouldn't include him in a charter for a new local chapter. Either way, he felt disrespected, betrayed even.
And his reaction was?
Revenge, basically. He decided he was going to publish this expose, Illustrations of Masonry. He threatened to reveal all their secret handshakes, passwords, the secret degree work. Everything.
Which, for a secret society, is kind of the nuclear option.
Absolutely. It's their worst nightmare. And the local Masons' reaction, it was not subtle and incredibly damaging to them in the long run.
How did they try and stop him? It wasn't just asking nicely, I gather.
Oh, no. They vehemently objected, as you'd expect, but it escalated quickly from objections to, criminal acts. First, they apparently tried to burn down the printing office of his publisher, a guy named David Miller. Yeah. And then they started this campaign of harassing Morgan directly, using the legal system against him. He was arrested over and over on what the sources call really flimsy charges.
I remember reading about one of those charges. It was almost funny if it wasn't so, sinister.
The debt one.
Yeah.
Right. That's the most famous example. They had him arrested for supposedly owing a debt of $2.69. $2.69.
Wow.
It was obviously pretextual. They'd arrest him, he'd get bailed out, they'd immediately arrest him again on some other minor thing. It showed this, frankly, terrifying level of coordination among the local Masons who happened to be, sheriffs, judges.
People in positions of power.
Exactly, using their power to shut him up.
But it didn't stop at harassment. Things took a much darker turn in September 1826.
Yeah, the harassment campaign failed to stop the book. So, when Morgan was released from jail one last time in Canandaigua, he was immediately grabbed, abducted,
Just vanished.
just vanished, kidnapped, and never seen again, alive or dead. That's the quote. Gone.
And the assumption was,
The immediate and widespread assumption, given everything that had happened, was that the Masons had murdered him. Murdered for revealing the secrets of their order. The belief was they probably took him across the border into Canada and dumped him in the Niagara River or Lake Ontario.
just horrific. But what really solidified this, what turned it from a crime into a political catalyst, was the aftermath, right? The investigation, the trials.
Absolutely crucial. Several local Masons were eventually charged in connection with his disappearance. They were tried, and they were acquitted.
Acquitted after all that.
Acquitted. And for the growing number of people suspicious of the Masons, this was the smoking gun. It wasn't just a theory anymore.
It looked like proof.
It looked like absolute proof. Proof that Masons controlled the courts and other offices. Proof that they were willing and capable of obstructing the investigation into their own crimes. The abstract fear became documented fact in the public mind.
The system itself seemed corrupt.
Exactly. The argument became the whole system is compromised by these secret oaths. The only answer is to rip it out, root and branch. Restore good government by purging every Mason from office.
So the Masons, through their own, as you said, thuggish and illegal actions, the arson, the kidnapping, the acquittals,
Yeah.
they basically handed the anti-Masons their entire case on a silver platter.
They really did. They confirmed the worst suspicions about themselves. And, the speed at which this tragic event was turned into political fuel is pretty stark.
There's that story about Thurlow Weed, right? One of the key organizers.
Yeah, Thurlow Weed, a master political strategist, but maybe not the most sentimental guy. The story goes that later, when some unidentified decomposed body washed up on the shore of Lake Ontario,
Grim.
very grim, Weed supposedly looked at it and said it was a good enough Morgan until after the 1828 elections.
Wow. So the actual truth didn't matter as much as the political usefulness of having a martyr?
That seems to be the implication. Whether it was really Morgan or not was secondary. What mattered was the symbol, the murdered whistleblower, killed by the secret elite. It was incredibly potent political ammunition.
That anecdote really captures the shift, doesn't it? From this genuine outrage over Morgan to a calculated political strategy. But Morgan's disappearance, horrific as it was just the spark. The ground was already fertile, right? This all happened in upstate New York, in the burned-over district.
Yeah.
Why was that region so ready for this kind of movement?
Yeah, the burned over district. That term refers to Western and Central New York State at the time, and it was called that because it had been swept by so many intense waves of religious revivalism during the Second Great Awakening. It was constantly scorched by revivalism.
So a very religiously charged atmosphere.
Extremely. You had these continuous, fiery evangelical movements rolling through. People were deeply focused on moral purity, on rooting out sin, on social reform based on religious principles. Plus, there was a lot of social upheaval. The Erie Canal was new. The economy was changing rapidly.
Creating anxiety, looking for answers.
Exactly. It created this environment where people felt adrift and were searching for clear moral frameworks, clear enemies, clear solutions.
And what was this revivalist spirit pushing against? What was the enemy before Masonry came along?
Well, it was fundamentally a reaction against the dominant ideas of the previous generation, the generation of the founders. It rejected the skepticism, deism, Unitarianism, and rationalism of the Enlightenment.
The things associated with figures like Jefferson or Franklin, some of them were Masons.
Precisely. The revivalists wanted to return to, well, a much stricter, more orthodox, pious moral order. And Freemasonry, from their perspective, looked like the embodiment of that old Enlightenment rationalism.
How so? What was it about Masonry that clashed with the Awakening?
Several things. Its emphasis on reason over revelation, its arcane traditions and rituals, which seemed strange and potentially unholy. And crucially, its non-sectarianism. Masons required belief in a higher power, but not specifically in Jesus Christ or Orthodox Christian doctrine.
Which to the evangelicals of the burned-over district would seem
Watered down at best, possibly dangerous. It looked unchristian, maybe even anti-Christian. It seemed like a secular brotherhood that competed with the church for men's loyalties and promoted a kind of universalism they found threatening.
So Masonry became a symbol of this moral threat, a threat to the soul of America as they saw it.
Exactly. It wasn't just a social club. It was an ideological enemy, a threat to the moral order. The anti-Masons then became the political arm, the moral militia, as some historians call them, for purging this secular, secretive, rationalist influence and restoring, civic health through moral cleansing. For many rank and file members, it was more crusade than campaign.
Okay, so that's the moral and religious fuel. Let's switch gears to the political opportunity this presented. This moral outrage got harnessed very effectively by people whose main goal was opposing Andrew Jackson. How did Masonry become a weapon against Old Hickory?
This is where the political operators like Thurlow Weed were really clever. They saw that Freemasonry was undeniably associated with the elite. It was an important part of the social life of men in the New Republic's elite.
The Establishment Club.
Pretty much, full of prominent businessmen and politicians. So attacking Masonry was inherently an anti-elitist move, which fit perfectly with the rising tide of Jacksonian democracy, the celebration of the common man.
But wait, wasn't Jackson himself the champion of the common man against the elites, like the Bank of the United States?
Exactly. And that was the brilliant contradiction the anti-Masons exploited. Andrew Jackson, the hero of the common man, the guy fighting the monster bank, was also a very prominent Freemason, a high-ranking Mason, in fact.
So they could paint him as a hypocrite.
Precisely. They basically took Jackson's own anti-elite rhetoric and turned it against him. They said, you think the bank is the real enemy, the real secret power? No. The real secret, oath-bound aristocracy, the real Hydra controlling things, is Freemasonry. And look, your hero, Jackson, is one of their top guys.
Wow. That's a powerful argument to make to his own base, potentially.
Incredibly powerful. It allowed them to peel away some of that populist energy, especially among the very religious or those genuinely suspicious of any kind of elite network, and aim it squarely at the biggest populist figure of the age.
This sounds like a potentially explosive mix of people in one party, though. You've got the true believers, the moral crusaders from the burned-over district, and these pragmatic political operators mainly focused on beating Jackson. How did that coalition hold together? Or did it?
That's the key tension, and ultimately the party's fatal flaw. It was always an uneasy alliance. On one side, you had the idealists. These were the folks mostly from that upstate New York crucible who genuinely wished to use anti-Masonry as a means of remaking society. They wanted moral purification, and they weren't willing to compromise.
No deals with the devil, so to speak.
Right. For them, getting rid of Masonry was the point. Then on the other side, you had the pragmatic politicians, people like Weed, William H. Seward, who saw the movement's energy as a fantastic tool for building something else. A permanent political organization strong enough to challenge Jackson and the Democrats.
They were playing the long game.
They were playing the long game. The idealists provided the fire, the moral urgency, the volunteers. The pragmatists provided the strategy, the organization, the connections. But their fundamental goals were different, and that conflict would eventually tear the party apart.
Okay, so we've got the origins, the murder, the religious fervor, the anti-Jackson angle. Before we get to how it all played out, let's pin down exactly what the Anti-Masonic Party was saying.
Yeah.
What was their official indictment? They laid it out at their convention in 1831, right?
They did. It wasn't just vague muttering about elites. They had specific charges against Masonry. 3 main ones, really.
What's the first?
The first was about its structure and character. They slammed Masonry for its secrecy, exclusivity, and undemocratic character. In an era where America was supposedly opening up, moving towards more democracy, more suffrage for white men at least.
Having a secret club where you had to be invited in seemed wrong.
Exactly. It seemed fundamentally anti-Republican, anti-egalitarian. Why the secrets? Why the exclusivity? It just rubbed people the wrong way in that populist moment.
Okay, what was the second charge? This one seems more alarming.
Yeah, the second charge really upped the ante. They argued that Masons actually posed a threat to American republicanism itself, the core of the nation.
Based on what?
Based on the oaths. Remember, Morgan was going to publish the secret oaths. The anti-Masons claimed that these oaths, Masons swore to each other oaths of loyalty, mutual support, keeping secrets actually superseded their loyalty to the country.
Their Masonic oath trumped their oath as a citizen or an office holder.
That was the claim, that these secret fraternal bonds were, in fact, too strong for a healthy republic. They argued that a government based on impartial laws and public duty couldn't function if a large group of its leaders had secret, overriding allegiances to each other. How could a Masonic judge rule impartially in a case involving a fellow Mason?
You can see the logic, especially after the Morgan trial acquittals.
Absolutely. The acquittals seem to prove this point directly.
And given those first 2 charges, what was their proposed solution? What did they want to do?
Well, if you believe Masonry is an undemocratic secret society whose oaths undermine the Republic, the solution is pretty straightforward, if drastic. Their stated goal was nothing less than to restore good government by purging all Masons from public office, every single one.
A total cleansing.
Oh, total cleansing, from the local sheriff right up to the president. They weren't interested in reform or regulation. They wanted elimination from public life. Hashtag B, separating fact from paranoia.
Okay, that's a pretty dramatic platform. A secret society undermining the nation, needing a total purge. Now, let's step back with our historical perspective. How much of this was real and how much was, well, paranoia?
Well, the overwhelming consensus among historians today is that the core premise was wrong. The party was founded on the conspiracy theory and driven by political paranoia.
So, no secret Masonic plan to take over America.
No, there's just no credible evidence for that. No documents, no proof of a coordinated plot directed from the lodges to control the government or subvert the Constitution. Most Masons were just, local businessmen, professionals joining a fraternal group for networking and socializing.
Okay, so the conspiracy part was fantasy. But was there anything true in their complaints? Was there that kernel of truth you sometimes find in these things?
Yes, there definitely was. And it's crucial, the part they got right was the elitism. Freemasonry in the early American Republic was, without question, an elite institution. It was the prominent secular fraternal order for the establishment. You look at who was a Mason back then: George Washington, Benjamin Franklin, later Andrew Jackson, Henry Clay.
Big names. The powerful people.
The biggest names, the movers and shakers. In many places, especially in the older states on the East Coast, joining the Masons was almost expected if you wanted to get ahead in business or politics. It was a network of the powerful.
So the anti-Masons weren't wrong that powerful men were Masons?
No, they were right about that. Their mistake was in the interpretation. They made that classic confusing correlation with causation.
Meaning
they saw that powerful men were Masons, and they assumed that the Masonic Lodge was the source of their power, that the secrets and rituals were somehow the magic key to their success, that the Lodge was this hydra secretly directing everything.
when in reality,
In reality, it was mostly the other way around. These men were already powerful or on their way up, and then they joined the prominent social and networking organization of their class, which happened to be the Masons. The Lodge reflected their elite status more than it created it.
it was a symptom, not the disease itself, from their perspective.
Pretty good way to put it. The real issue might have been the concentration of power in that elite class, but the anti-Masons focused on the club badge, the secret handshake, as the root cause.
Okay, if the court conspiracy was flawed, why did it catch on so powerfully? Why did it almost destroy the Masons? It wasn't just the Morgan affair, was it?
The Morgan affair was the trigger, the proof. But the Masons themselves had made their own bed, really. They created the conditions for suspicion through their own actions and culture. These were major self-inflicted wounds.
Like what?
First, just the basic obsession with secrecy. In a country that was increasingly valuing openness and public opinion, all the arcane traditions and rituals, the secret oaths, the closed doors, it just naturally bred deep suspicion. Why all the secrecy if you have nothing to hide?
That's a question that resonates even today with certain groups.
Absolutely. Secrecy always looks suspicious from the outside, but the thing that turned that suspicion into outright hostility, the thing that made the whole conspiracy theory seem plausible, was, as we discussed, the Masons' own disastrously thuggish and illegal response to William Morgan.
The arson, the harassment, the kidnapping, the murder, the cover-up.
Exactly. When Masons in positions of authority judges, sheriffs were seen to be protecting their Masonic brothers who had committed serious crimes, it provided concrete, undeniable evidence that, yes, sometimes Masonic loyalty did trump public duty and the rule of law.
They acted exactly like the secret cabal the anti-Masons accused them of being.
Precisely. They couldn't have done a better job of validating the anti-Masonic platform if they'd tried. Their own actions made the paranoid theory look like documented fact.
Okay, so the movement gained incredible traction, fueled by Morgan's murder and this potent mix of religious and anti-elite sentiment. But ultimately, as a national political party trying to win the presidency, it failed. And the seeds of that failure were sown, ironically, at the moment of their greatest innovation.
That's right. The anti-Masons knew they had to practice what they preached about openness. So, to counter the image of backroom deals, they decided to hold the first party presidential nomination convention in American history. Baltimore, September 1831.
A huge step for democracy, really, taking the nomination process out of the hands of the congressional elite King Caucus.
A massive institutional leap. It was designed to be transparent, populist, the opposite of a secret Masonic lodge meeting, a triumph of political process.
Oh, wow.
But the actual decision made at this open convention immediately blew up the fragile coalition between the idealists and the pragmatists.
What happened? Who did they nominate?
Well, the pragmatists, led by guys like Thurlow Weed, were thinking strategically. They knew anti-Masonry alone probably wouldn't win nationally. They needed to broaden the appeal, attract more establishment types, look respectable.
Okay.
So they engineered the nomination of William Wirt of Maryland. Wirt was a big name, a respected lawyer, former U.S. Attorney General. He looked like a serious candidate.
Sounds reasonable. What was the problem?
The problem was huge. William Wirt, the chosen standard bearer for the party dedicated to eradicating Masonry from public life, was a former Freemason himself.
Oh, wow. That's problematic.
Problematic is an understatement. For the hardcore idealists in the party, the true believers from the burned-over district, this was utter betrayal, a catastrophe.
How did Wirt and the pragmatists justify this?
Wirt tried to smooth it over. He accepted the nomination, but made a point of saying he hadn't been active in the lodge for years, claimed he'd always been a bit skeptical of it anyway.
Like that wasn't good enough for the base.
Not even close. The nomination of a former Mason, no matter how lapsed, completely alienated the uncompromising idealists. These were the people providing the grassroots energy, the moral fire. They felt the pragmatists had sold out the cause just for a shot at power. The movement's momentum started to wane almost immediately.
So the convention was a democratic success, but a political disaster for party unity.
Pretty much. And the election results in 1832 showed it.
How badly did they do?
It was a wipeout. Andrew Jackson, the Masonic archenemy, won a landslide re-election. William Wirt, the anti-Masonic candidate, he got a tiny 7.8% of the popular vote.
Only 7.8%. Ouch!
Yeah. And he won only one single state, Vermont, which was an anti-Masonic stronghold, but still.
So the election proved their point, that this single issue wasn't enough.
It proved it definitively. Anti-Masonry was incredibly powerful for mobilizing people at the state and local level, especially where the Morgan affair was fresh. But as a single national platform, it was just too narrow. It couldn't compete with Jackson's popularity and the Democrats' organization on the national stage. #tag B absorption into the Whig coalition.
So the Anti-Masonic Party essentially dies after 1832. But the story doesn't end there. The leaders, the organizers, the voters, they didn't just disappear. What happened next?
The pragmatists, being pragmatic, knew when to cut their losses and change strategy. They saw that anti-Masonry couldn't win on its own, but its energy and, crucially, its organization could be a powerful building block for a larger coalition against Jackson.
Enter the Whig Party.
Exactly. Around 1834, the Whig Party starts to coalesce, bringing together pretty much everyone who disliked Andrew Jackson and his policies. The old National Republicans, some states' rights advocates, growing nativist groups, and importantly, the anti-Masons.
So the Anti-Masonic Party just kind of merged.
Essentially, yes. It formally merged into the Whig Party. By 1835, the Anti-Masonic Party as a separate entity was nearly defunct. Its members, its voters, and especially its leaders found a new home.
And it turned out to be a great move for those leaders, didn't it? The ones who prioritized organization over the original crusade.
Oh, absolutely. For the pragmatic wing, this was a huge success. They basically traded the dying anti-Masonic brand for positions of power within the new, much broader, and ultimately more successful Whig Party.
Can you give us some examples? Who made that leap successfully?
Well, the prime example is Thurlow Weed himself, the guy with the good enough Morgan line. He became the absolute political boss of the Whig Party in New York State. Hugely powerful, known as the Wizard of the Lobby.
Okay.
Then there's his protege, William H. Seward. Seward got his start as an anti-Masonic state senator in New York. He smoothly transitioned to the Whigs, became Whig governor of New York.
And later, Lincoln's Secretary of State.
Exactly, a major national figure for decades. And you also have people like Millard Fillmore, another politician who started out as an anti-Mason in New York, climbed the ladder in the Whig Party, and eventually became president of the United States.
So Fillmore, a former anti-Mason, becomes president. That's quite an outcome.
It really is. It shows how effectively that initial anti-Masonic organizational energy was channeled into mainstream politics, even after the original issue faded.
But what about the issue itself? Was anti-Masonry just dropped completely when they joined the Whigs?
Pretty much, yeah. That was the trade-off. To build the broader Whig coalition, the single, intense focus on Masonry had to be sacrificed. It was too narrow, too divisive for the new party.
But Did the anti-Masons bring anything else to the Whigs besides just voters and organizers? Any policy ideas?
Yes, absolutely. While the Anti-Masonic Crusade died, the broader economic platform that the Anti-Masons had developed was largely adopted by the Whigs.
What kind of platform was that?
It was what's often called the American School, or later the American System ideology. Basically, government support for economic development. Things like protective tariffs to help American industries, federal funding for roads, canals, and all manner of internal improvements.
Stuff Jackson generally opposed.
Right. Jackson favored limited government, more agrarian interests. The Whigs, incorporating the anti-Masonic base, which included many northern businessmen and farmers who wanted better transport, adopted this platform of active government support for commerce and infrastructure.
So the specific enemy changed, but the underlying vision for America carried over.
In a way, yes. The Anti-Masonic Party died, but its leaders thrived, its voters found a new home, and its economic vision helped shape the platform of the Whig Party for the next 20 years. Not bad for a failed party.
Okay, we've covered this spectacular failure, the lost election, the party dissolving. Now let's really focus on the successful part of this successful failure. Beyond launching some careers and influencing the Whigs, what lasting structural changes did this paranoid, short-lived movement leave on American politics?
This is arguably their biggest legacy, the most important impact.
Hmm.
They fundamentally changed how presidential politics works by inventing institutions that promoted openness, or at least the appearance of it. And these changes stuck.
And the first huge one we already mentioned, the National Nominating Convention.
Yes, that 1831 Baltimore meeting, it wasn't just the Anti-Masons' first convention. It was the first national party nominating convention in American history, period.
Before that, it was King Caucus, right? Just congressmen meeting in secret.
Exactly. A small group of insiders in Washington picking the candidates. The convention system, pioneered by the Anti-Masons, took that power theoretically out of the back rooms and gave it to delegates chosen at the state or local level, meeting in a public forum. A massive shift towards mass participation.
And what was the second big innovation they rolled out at that same convention?
Along with the convention itself, they also issued the first written party platform.
Why was that so revolutionary? Didn't parties have stances before?
They had stances, sure, but politics was much more personality-driven. Allegiances were often to a specific leader based on vague principles or regional ties. The written platform was different. It was a public, documented list of the party's principles and policy goals.
So candidates were now expected to run on that platform, not just their own charisma.
That was the idea. It replaced that kind of fuzzy, personality-based politics with a clear public contract, supposedly binding on the party and its candidates. It forced parties to define themselves on issues, not just connections.
And they were also early adopters of using the media for mass politics.
Definitely. They really expanded the use of dedicated party newspapers. Things like the Anti-Masonic Inquirer or Thurlow Weed's paper, the Albany Journal. These weren't neutral news sources. They were propaganda arms, essential tools for organizing the party faithful, spreading the message, attacking opponents.
Keeping the base fired up.
Exactly. They understood that if you want to mobilize a mass electorate, you need mass communication tools dedicated to your cause.
Let's dig into the why behind these innovations, though. Why did the Anti-Masons specifically invent the convention and the platform? Was it just about being more democratic?
It was about being democratic, yes, but it was also deeply tied into their core ideology, their fight against secrecy. Think about what they hated. The Masonic Lodge, secret meetings, secret oaths, elite insiders making decisions.
Okay.
Now think about the old system for picking presidents. King Caucus, what was that? It was a small group of elite insiders, congressmen, meeting in secret behind closed doors in Washington to make decisions.
So King Caucus looked just like a Masonic lodge to them.
Ideologically, yes, it was the political equivalent of the secret society they were fighting. It represented everything they opposed: secrecy, exclusivity, elite control. So they had to invent the structural opposite.
The public convention, the written platform.
Exactly. These weren't just random good ideas. They were conceived as the antidote to secrecy. They were designed to be visible, public, participatory, replacing the secret rituals of power, whether in the lodge or in Congress, with open debate and a clear written statement of intent. They were fighting secrecy by institutionalizing transparency.
Okay, so they inadvertently revolutionized political mechanics.
Yeah.
What about their original goal? Did they actually succeed in hurting Freemasonry itself?
Oh, yes. On the social front, their original crusade was remarkably successful, at least for a time. The sheer intensity of the public backlash, fueled by the Morgan scandal, it was devastating for the
How
Masons.
bad did it get for them?
Really bad. In the states where anti-Masonry was strongest, New York, Pennsylvania, parts of New England, the sources say it led to the nearly total, albeit temporary, destruction of Masonry. Lodges closed, membership plummeted. The fraternity basically went underground, achieving near extinction in public life for about a generation.
Wow, near extinction. So it was a powerful social movement, even if the party failed electorally.
Hugely powerful. It put the fear of God, quite literally, into the Masonic order in America.
Did the Masons just wait it out? Did they bounce back unchanged once the fervor died down?
No, and this is another crucial part of the legacy. The anti-Masonic movement permanently changed the nature of Freemasonry in the United States.
Yeah.
The fraternity had to fundamentally rebrand itself to survive.
How so?
They learned a harsh lesson about public perception and political involvement. As one historian put it, the Masons basically sold its soul in exchange for public acceptance. They made a conscious decision to retreat completely from the public political sphere.
No more being the obvious club for politicians and elites.
Right. They stopped being that kind of overt network for the powerful. Instead, they pivoted hard towards being an apolitical, inward-looking fraternal society. Focused on things like fun, frolic, and fellowship, as one Masonic motto goes. And very importantly, they massively ramped up their public charity work. Things like the Shriners Hospitals for Children, or later campaigns against diseases like muscular dystrophy.
Becoming seen as benevolent and harmless.
Exactly. They had to shed the image of the secretive, powerful cabal and adopt the image of a quiet, civic-minded, charitable organization. The political sting, the association with elite power brokering, was deliberately and permanently removed to ensure their survival after the anti-Masonic onslaught. Hashtag in conclusion and final takeaway.
So when you wrap it all up, the story of the Anti-Masonic Party is just dripping with irony, isn't it?
It really is. You have this movement born from political paranoia, obsessed with this idea of a hidden elite controlling everything.
And what does it do?
It ends up building the visible, public, structural framework, the convention, the platform that becomes essential for modern mass democratic politics, the very tools designed to bring politics out into the open.
A classic case of unintended consequences.
Completely. And even though the party itself vanished quickly, its impact was huge. Socially, it forced Freemasonry to become the apolitical charitable group we largely see today. Politically, it gave birth to key leaders and organizational structures that formed the Whig Party, the main opposition to the Democrats, for decades.
And you could argue it set a kind of template, couldn't you, for a certain style of American politics that keeps recurring.
I think so. That pattern of a movement that's intensely populist and conspiracy obsessed, that channels deep anti-elitism against some perceived hidden group, whether it's Masons or immigrants or bankers or the deep state, that seems like a recurring theme. The anti-Masons really wrote the first draft of that playbook.
So the big takeaway seems to be that their real success wasn't beating the Masons, but forcing politics, or at least the nomination process, out into the public square. The convention and platform were meant to create transparency, to fight secrecy.
That was the explicit goal: make power visible and accountable.
Which leads to a final thought, maybe something for you, our listener, to consider. If the whole point of these structures, the convention, the platform, was to fight secretive elite control, how well are they doing today? When you look at our modern nominating process with, the massive roll of money, super PACs, consultants, the whole invisible primary thing.
The backroom deals still happen, just maybe in different rooms.
Right. So did the pragmatic leaders who built these structures ultimately succeed in creating lasting transparency? Or has that deep-seated American paranoia, that suspicion of elites, just found new targets within the very public structured system the anti-Masons accidentally helped create? Are the elites just hiding in plain sight now?
That's a really interesting question. Did they cage the beast or just change its shape?
Something to think about. That's all the time we have for this deep dive into the strange, contradictory, and surprisingly important story of the Anti-Masonic Party.